Hi, I'm Annabelle Gray, and I'm a senior product designer in Create Code Review. In this video, I'm going to walk through the research synthesis that we wrapped up last month that covers merge request navigation and user flow. For just a little bit of background, when going through this, what we did was we went through all of the existing research that had to do with navigation and user flow. And this was conducted over the last year or two, and that includes customer and user feedback. And the idea was to kind of get a big picture, an overview of what our next steps could be, figuring out user pain points and what they wish that code review did have or didn't have, and that kind of thing. So the top takeaways were twofold. The first is that the merge request UI is overwhelming and the page lacks focus. It's difficult to parse and it feels crowded, and I'll show you an example of this later on in the presentation. There's too much information presented, but despite all of that information, it's still difficult to get a quick overview of the merge request. And information and actions are scattered, making it unclear what users should look at. So that was kind of the first hypothesis, which was validated. The second is the user flow changes depending on the role, which is either the author of the merge request or the reviewer, and where that user is within the review cycle. This is true. The user flow absolutely does change depending on where you are and your role. It was difficult to get a clear picture of how to answer this and how to take action on this. So I'm currently actually in the middle of conducting further research on the merge request cycle from the perspective of both the author and the reviewer. And there's a link here to check out that research, but it's still ongoing, so it should be interesting when that wraps up. The recommendations that came out of this are mostly, well, actually all related to that first hypothesis. So in order of value to help streamline the merge request UI and focus users' attention, we should first research the user journey of merge request authors and reviewers to inform the next recommendations, and that's what I'm currently in the middle of doing. 2, reorganize merge request metadata to emphasize what users value and use the most. And this actually links to another slide deck that I believe Anna put together, which talks about the metadata on issues and merge requests and how they are ranked in order of value by users. So what items can we reorganize, remove, change to help users accomplish what they're trying to do? 3 is move the merge request widgets to a consistent location to increase their findability and usage. I have an example of this later, but I think we're all aware that depending on the merge request description length, the widgets can appear in various places. So it's not always easy to find where they are when you're trying to find the pipeline status or something like that. You might have to scroll up and down a bit. 4th, redesign comments and activity to highlight relevant items and ease chronological reading. This is the result of our threaded discussion feature, where you can respond to threads that appear kind of at any point in time. In addition to that, we also have the conversation spanning the changes tab and the overview tab, which can make it tricky to figure out what happened and when without kind of scrolling up and down and switching between the tabs. And last, research the currently fixed UI elements to remove this behavior, this fixed behavior, whenever possible. This is just a general kind of GitLab UI feature. We have a lot of fixed elements on the left, right, and top of the screen, and then on the code review pages, we have even more fixed elements, and it can kind of add to the noise and clutter and sort of make the user's eyes darting. It makes it difficult to concentrate on the code review process when you have so many things grabbing your attention. To look at a few examples, this is the overview tab, and this is a quote from a user. The overview, especially in the merge requests, is overloaded with important information, and you can't distinguish between important and not important. This is an example of a merge request that I took a screenshot of last month, I believe. So some questions you might have when looking at this is how many lines have been changed. You can see that there have been 9 changed files, but you don't know on first glance how many lines that might be. Has this already been reviewed? Has it already been approved? I'm not sure. I can see that there's a reviewer assigned, but I don't know what stage we're at right now. Did the pipeline pass? I can't see the pipeline status without scrolling. And is all this metadata useful to me? And as I linked to earlier, probably not. Some users typically have an idea of what they want to see, and there are common themes that emerged about what metadata is most useful and what metadata people really don't want to see all the time. Threads break the chronology of the events, making it difficult to see what has occurred since previously viewing the merge request. And this can come into play when multiple reviews of a merge request occur. You can make some comments, you pass it back to the author, and that author makes changes and comments back. And since we have comments spanning 2 tabs and some of them are threaded, some of them are on diffs, it can be hard to figure out what happened since you last looked at it. Right, so this is an example of a merge request with 63 comments, and I just scrolled through for the purpose of this GIF, and you can see multiple different types of comments. Some are on outdated diffs, some are on current diffs, some are resolved, some are not, some have code blocks, some are at the bottom, at the top, some are threaded, some are not. We have many different types of comments. Resolved discussions are collapsed, meaning you can't easily search for comments or suggestions. We've heard many users talk about how, they might comment on something that's already been discussed and resolved, but since it's already been collapsed, you won't know it. In this example, resolved threads for current or older diff versions appear the same. You can see that this top one is a thread on a diff that was not updated before merge, and that all the rest of these are on old versions of the diff. So something like that might be, well, it probably is very useful to everyone who's looking at that merge request. These are all given the same weight, all given the same styling, but this piece of code was merged and none of these were. So it might be something that needs to be looked at. Responses in these collapsed threads can be from any point in time. They are not necessarily chronological. And here's another example of the chronology. You can see this was merged on January 19th, but if you scroll to the top of that merge request, you can see a comment on the very first thread from the next day. And it can be hard to figure out what happened basically since that merge request was merged. And again, on that exact same merge request, equal weight and styling of activity makes it difficult to see more important actions. For example, when you first glance at this, it's quite difficult to figure out when it was merged. Looking at all of these pieces of all these system notes, you can see that it was mentioned in a merge request, mentioned in issues, resolved, mentioned in another merge request, and that it was actually merged right here 7 months ago. Something that we could do would be to kind of improve the styling or call out more important system notes. Moving on to the Changes tab. Merge request code review UI is hard to get to show enough of the files to see the code logic. This makes code reviews for larger changes difficult. This is an example of the Changes tab open in a merge request, and this is kind of not worst case scenario, but this is everything expanded. So you've got your global nav, file tree, side-by-side diff mode, and you've got the sidebar expanded. This is a 16-inch MacBook Pro, and these are the areas that you actually are focusing on when performing that code review. And then a scrolling version of this kind of shows the actual workspace is each individual pane, and then you've got all of these fixed elements plus the file name fixed elements. I'm not saying that this is necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that we might want to reconsider. Maybe not everything needs to be fixed. A couple considerations that we thought of were that there seemed to be some conflicting research, conflicting conclusions or quotes from users. So some users were mentioning there was an information overload on these pages, but at the same time they wanted to see more information on first glance. For example, users wanted to see specific widget information right away. So we need to be very mindful when balancing there's too much information presented with I need to see all of this information right away. And that kind of concludes this presentation. If you're interested in any further reading, I have links to the mural, the research issue, and other research issues that pertain to this. For example, the merge request widgets issue and feedback summary. So that's it. Thanks for watching.